Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Now, before we get to this amazing episode of the Health Oddity podcast, we thought it would be prudent for us to do a little intro just to warn you. Warn may be a bit of an extreme word for this, but Simon in this episode talks about his experiences of being kidnapped. And one of them is actually quite fine, and we have a bit of a laugh about it. But the other two, there will be descriptions of things that happened to him and things he had to do to escape in the third one specifically that you may find a bit disturbing. So just to let you know before you listen to this episode that there are some graphic descriptions. Having said that, there's a lot to learn from this as well because of how Simon processed these traumatizing experiences and where that's taken him to in his life. So please enjoy. And yeah, this is an amazing episode. Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast. This is episode number 101. We've crossed the line. We're doing all right. So yeah, we've got a super guest on today. And it's really interesting because I'll try and introduce him in a little bit. But I don't actually know that much about him. He's just looking behind him now as if to go, where is he? But yeah, I don't know much about this guy, but it'll be really interesting getting to know him actually, because I've actually done one of his courses. He's got a free course, which we'll talk about in a bit, but I've actually done that. And it's just very interesting to read through and see where he's coming from. But also he's got a very interesting backstory, as I understand, and I'll be learning more about that today. But before we get started there, if you're a regular listener, please give us a like and a share. Please tell your friends, especially possibly with this episode, however it goes. I don't know how it's going to go yet, but this is going to be another important one that will probably help somebody. If it helps one person, that's all we're after. So like, share, leave a review, whatever platform you're listening on, pass it on, email it to your friends, anything. And again, before we get started, we'll just talk to the usual suspects, which usually begins with me, but I'm introducing it this week. So we'll start with Paul, because that never happens. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm okay. We're in 39 degrees in London at the moment.
That's all right.
I don't mind it, actually. I mean, it's been freezing most of the time.
Yeah. Well, just think about it. It's like being on holiday, as in sweaty and all that, and you just want to go for a few beers.
when people go to Turkey or something like that, or they go to Portugal, they do all these kind of Instagram pics of how relaxed they look when they're eating their kind of Mediterranean meals and their kind of white wine spritzers and mojitos or whatever. But then when they have it in London, it's like, oh my God, the world's falling apart. And sit down, like fainting and things like that. So, it won't last that long. Then it'll be cold again.
Well, no, it's done by tomorrow, as far as I know.
Yeah.
It's back down to 25 tomorrow, which for me used to be stinking hot, but I think I'm going to be able to handle that.
See, I like getting on my bike at like 5:30 in the morning and not having to wear 2 hats, really thick gloves, about 4 jumpers to go down into work,
Well, I train outside, don't I? So in the winter, I have to come in and like wash my hands under the warm tap just to get some feeling back into them again. So
I had that one year. I went down and it snowed, and I had to stop off at 2 coffee shops to buy coffee, not to drink, just to hold, to warm up my hands, because I had to be fair, I had subpar gloves at the time.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. I did think of something to say there as well, but I'm not going to. So anyway, James, how are you doing after that? James is well. I know how James is doing because I know where he was about 5 minutes before we started recording this.
Yes, it was a very, in hindsight, a good decision to have my ice tub installed last week.
That is just such fortuitous timing. It's unbelievable.
Because now I'm literally just jumping in there all throughout the day. So I just had a bit of a 5-minute sit in there before coming on here, and
5 minutes at what temperature?
it's just set at 10 degrees at the moment.
All
So
right,
it's
which
nice.
sounds, for some reason, 10 degrees sounds warm, doesn't it? But it's not.
Yeah, it's cold enough, but it's not so cold that you jump in and want to jump straight out again. So it's a nice kind of temperature that I can sort of submerge myself in there and actually get quite comfortable for 5 minutes or so.
Does it heat up as well? So like when it's like 0 degrees outside, does it heat it up to 10 degrees?
It can heat it or cool it. Yeah, but I've got the hot tub next to it, so I'll keep that nice and hot, and then I can go from the hot to the cold. So that's really, really nice.
Do you ever put, like, see if that thing works, and you put one hand in the hot one and one in the cold one, and then you piss yourself? Do you remember that? Did you ever think about that when you were kids? Like when someone's asleep, you put a hand in a bowl of water, one hot and one cold, and it would make them. Anyway,
did you have many friends at school?
Anyway,
no, I was a bit of a loner, to be honest. But there you go.
And I'm approaching the most productive day of the year because I go on holiday on Thursday. So tomorrow is going to be the day that I've got a list, as long as a list can be, of stuff that needs to get done tomorrow. You know,
you've got a list. That's Parkinson's law. We spoke about this last week. Didn't we?
Yeah, and I'm working, 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. tomorrow, but everything will be done and packing will be done and everything will be sorted. And then I'll be off on holiday for a couple of weeks.
Will there be a Rocky style training montage from it? As you're just, like at the beginning of Murder, She Wrote, where you got the typewriter, throw in the, yeah.
Possibly. And then I'm having a social media, total tech detox, no social media, no phone.
No side trance.
The phone will be left in at the airport in England, and I'll be uncontactable for 2 weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. So
excellent. That sounds lovely.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway,
does your business need you then?
Oh. No, not for 2 weeks.
But that's the whole point of business, right?
Yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah. So
that's quite a good place to be.
Otherwise, it's just a hobby.
Yeah, so it's just a job. Yeah, no, so that's the idea, is that, it will not need me for 2 weeks. I've done 3 weeks before with 0 phone and 0 email and 0 everything. And I've got a sort of team who look after things, and it will be absolutely fine. And anything that's not will be dealt with on my return. So it's going to be good. Looking forward to it.
Very good.
He's going to be, I would say, be all zen in that when he gets back. But I mean, he's already got a bald head and a beard, so it's going to be quite hard to tell.
It's going to work on the belly to go with it.
Yeah. Which form of Buddha are you going to go for? The slim one or the one that's sitting there with a big, Anyway, you've just heard the man there, and I'm about to introduce him, and I haven't asked him how to pronounce his surname. So we have Simon
Maryan.
Maryan. Simon Maryan. That's not his middle name, that's his surname. On here. So hi Simon, how are you doing?
I'm good. Sweating, glistening, I think, is a big good description.
Yeah, we'll not say what you said you were sweating like before.
No, probably best
before
not.
We started recording, because we might get cancelled. But anyway,
don't men sweat and women glisten?
Women glow.
Something like that. Yes.
Yeah, women
apparently.
glow, and Sean glows buckets. I'll tell you. Anyway, so it's Simon Maryan, and like I said at the beginning, I don't know much about you, Simon. We had a very brief chat on Messenger, yes. And you were recommended to us by Kirsten Tulloch, friend of the show. She was on right in the early days of this podcast. So we've been going about 2 years now. So she was on right in the beginning. So just, it would be good to hear, because you've got, like I said, it sounds like you've got a fascinating story, which obviously culminates in what we were talking about just before we started as well. So yeah. Where does it all begin? Tell the viewers who you are.
Well, despite where I live in the northeast of Scotland, I was born in Plymouth. My dad was a Royal Marine as well. Did a lot of, he was a helicopter pilot. And when he left, the reason I have this connection with Scotland is because when I was 4, we went to Shetland.
Wow.
And he did his civvy conversion course to fly kind of like a longer version of the Sea King called a Sikorsky 61. And he was flying out to the rigs and stuff. So that's why up in Shetland, and then for a couple of years, and then down in Aberdeenshire. And then it was Far East, Middle East, Africa. So I went to boarding school in Somerset.
Oh, that's near me. I'm in Bath. So where am
Yeah. Well, I was not far from Crewkerne.
I? Okay. Yeah.
And Taunton.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I'm up here. When I left, I joined the Marines from here. When I left the military, I came back here. In true fashion, I was medically discharged from the military. So I was losing my job. My marriage was going down the Swanee as well. So I was losing my home, my job, and my marriage all at the same time, which was so I kind of bolted to somewhere I knew people.
Yeah.
So I joined the Royal Marines pretty young, and kind of following a bit of a heavy military family. There's quite a few people in my family have been in the Marines in particularly, and I think I knew from an early age that was what I wanted to do. I was me and school didn't really get on.
Yeah.
I joined the Royal Marines with no qualifications whatsoever, because I just didn't get it, the necessity to actually study. So I was too busy playing rugby and drinking and fighting from an early age.
Yeah.
So yeah, that it was kind of, it was the best thing I could have done, really, because it really channeled my energy in the right way, rather than being an absolute pain in the ass all the time. It was just when I was drunk.
Yeah, but that's one of the things, isn't it? I think people find that it's like with military or a sport or something, isn't it? If they're not academic, or just don't, or it's not even not being academic, it's just not being like bothered about learning stuff. You've got energy, so you need to go, it needs to go somewhere, because otherwise it goes into drink or drugs or whatever, doesn't it? So we've spoken to a couple of sports people who are like that as well, and they were like, if they see people from their town who've done what they possibly would have done if they hadn't have channeled their energy, and
definitely. I would have been in a world of trouble, I think, if I hadn't taken the route I did. I absolutely loved it. I loved my time in the military. Really thoroughly enjoyed being in the Marines. And the latter part of my career, I got into human intelligence work. So my job, I had a bit of a forte for recruiting people. So when I was in the Corps, I found out I could get a degree. So I got all my qualifications I needed to, and then did sports psychology.
All right, wow.
Which I thoroughly enjoyed, and they paid for it, which is great. So happy days. But then I got into the human intelligence side. So, because I just had this knack for schmoozing people, really. I think there's a simple way of doing it, and convincing people to do things that we wanted them to do. Okay. So that was really good. So I did that for my last few years in the military, and then I left. I was medically discharged because I knackered myself, and I then carried on as a contractor afterwards, doing the same job. So, like in a lot of oil and gas is very prevalent up here, and when there's an oil crash or whatever, all these oil and gas companies, they ditch people, like drop them like hot rocks, and then when they need them back, they get them back as contractors, costing them even more money. It was the same sort of thing. I was, rather than being on a salary in the military doing the job, I then got taken back on a retainer and a day rate. So it was a win-win really on that one. And I carried on doing that intermittently I left in 99, and I carried on doing that until about 2008. And then sacked it all because I had 2 kids at that point, and it wasn't really I was trying to get away from it for a few years, but it's quite a hard line of work to get away from.
Why is that?
Partly because the way I was doing it as a contractor was the money was quite good. It was a hard thing to let go of, but then I landed on my feet in oil and gas and got a job. I actually ended up being on more money doing it in oil and gas doing coaching. So, but also they make it some of the organizations that I've worked for make it very difficult for you to get away. So if they ask you to come back and do another job, then they make it really, well, they can make it quite difficult and uncomfortable for you. So it took a while. I had to figure out a way to do it, and it finally got round to it. And it was so along the way I've had quite a few interesting experiences along the way, one of which I get stick for from my mates, because I was along the way I've been on all sides of kidnapping. So I've rescued hostages, I've negotiated the release of hostages, and I've been a hostage. And I've been involved in numerous kidnappings from different perspectives, but I've been kidnapped 3 times. So, and how fucking stupid can you be, really?
Well, you see,
Are you able to?
I don't know if that's I don't know if that's stupid or not, because if this was presumably when you were in the military.
No, this was not in the military. This was it was 3 years on the bounce as well, 2006,
Wow.
7, 8.
Okay, I thought I was going to say, if you're in the military and you've got like loads of people after you, I mean, there's no shame to that, is there?
No.
So okay,
no.
so what? That's interesting, because I like I say, I don't know that much about you, so I just assumed it was in the military. So what happened?
Well, it twice was in Nigeria, 2006. The first time, I was actually on a ship, and they got raided by pirates, or whatever. It was more of a political statement, really. It was that when that phase had just started again with the kidnappings in Nigeria. It kind of goes through cycles of activity, and it was really picking up. But it was such a bizarre. It was very surreal, because it's I didn't have a weapon, and you got these huge, great lumps of Nigerian men shoving AKs in your face, and telling you to do as you're told. So I got chucked into a speedboat, and there was 2 of us on this occasion, and we got taken into the swamps of the Niger Delta, and we were about 2 hours going upriver, and it was just very weird, because obviously it's terrifying when that happens. You do find out that adrenaline is brown and it runs down your leg. It's an unusual thing to experience, but I had the advantage of having training to help me kind of keep my brain in tune and not fall apart, which was it's definitely, it never really fully prepares you for it, but it's a bloody good step in the right direction. So yeah, I ended up crapping myself, obviously, because it's pretty scary. Then get to the village where these guys lived, and they said, "Listen, don't worry about it. We're not going to hurt you. We're just using you to have a go at the government and the oil companies, and we want you. We want to swap you for money. So nobody's going to hurt you." And they gave us a place to sleep with a mattress, a mosquito net, malaria tablets, fed us 3 times a day, and over the course of the 9 days, because that for them the water was more, obviously is a valuable commodity in that area, and it's more expensive for them to buy bottled water than beer. So they gave us beer all day, every day for 9 days, because they kept the water for their families, etc. And this particular beer is called Star Beer, and it's pretty grim when it's cold, but it was warm most of the time, and it was just absolutely honking. It was the worst hangover I've ever had. It was absolutely horrendous coming off that after 9 days. Oh, Jesus.
It's this. If forgive me for saying, it sounds like a holiday.
Well, this one was. It was this the weird thing. It was. Apart from pissing your pants at the very beginning, it was great because I was playing football with the kids. I ended up their weapons were in such a shit state. I actually said, look, right, unload it and I'll clean them out, and I serviced their weapons for them. So it was a very unusual thing. And it's when they said, well, day 9, it was like, right, okay, we'll drop you off now. So they took us down the river to the town on the river that's kind of like the in the center of this Bielsa state, a little place called Yenagoa. And we basically cross-decked. One boat came towards us, big bag of money came over. We crossed over, and they waved goodbye.
Wow,
that was it. You're like, holy shit. So yeah, that was it was weird because you couldn't really get your head around it to start with. Well, afterwards, it was looking back on it. Initially, when you get a debrief and to the necessary people, and it was like, did that really just happen?
That's weird. So what would happen if they would it have turned ugly if they if they hadn't got the money?
I think we were just had a really long holiday.
Okay, so they were basically just doing it more out of is it kind of like out of desperation, not out of like malice or anything like that?
Not to the people that they were, not this particular lot. They were let's say more making a statement to the government of Nigeria and to the oil companies. Okay. Because they just trashed their land.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a client who was kidnapped by the Taliban, and
that's a bit different.
Yeah, he's written a play about it actually because he's a comedian and he was working as a journalist, and now he's performing it in the Edinburgh Festival. But that happened about 20 years ago. So I think that's how he's made sense of it, is the fact he's written a play on it.
Yes.
It's I suppose when things like that happen, you're kind of like, what happened? How did I survive? Why did that happen? Why was it not one of the ones where I'm held with a gun to my head? You must have loads of questions that is just difficult to kind of answer.
Yeah, it is. It's a weird thing. I certainly didn't expect that to turn out the way it did. That was it was a real pleasant surprise, but it was, you're like, what the heck? Am I dreaming? Is just, your kidnappers are being nice to you and feeding you, and you're not cleaning their weapons and playing football with their kids, and it's just bizarre, really bizarre. But so yeah, that was apart from the initial shock of capture sort of thing, it was okay. The second one was very different. This time lasted 35 days, and this lot were just a bunch of scumbags. They're very different. They basically threw us, 5 of us taken on this occasion, and they threw us in a hut with a dirt floor, gave us nothing, gave us water and one small meal a day, and it was okay. They kind of left us alone, but the last 10 days they started to get really stroppy because they weren't getting paid, and they were getting drunk at night and drugged up, and then taking their frustrations out on us. So the beatings progressively got worse as the time went on. So we were getting daily kick-ins. It got one point at night where one guy took a fancy to hitting us with the flat side of a machete when he was pissed as a fart. They just come in and grab you by your hair, pull you out, and start kicking you around, and they got creative. I'll be fair to them. They dug a hole that was about 7 foot deep, and I don't know, about 3 foot wide, and we spent most of the day hands and feet tied, but they just drop you in the hole head first and leave you there for hours, and people just then use the hole to pee in and go for a dump. And so yeah, charmers, real charmers.
Where was this one, Simon? Was this in
Nigeria again? Well?
Yeah.
Down in the south again.
How do you process that?
Oh, that took a while. That did take a while to kind of get my head around. It was Yeah, because they started doing mock executions and stuff as well, you know. So stick in the barrel, they kick you in the head and knock you on the floor, and then stand on you and stick a barrel of an AK or a pistol in your mouth, and then. But that actually, as bizarre as it sounds, that got boring because you knew it was just going to be a dead click. Because there's no benefit to them handing over dead bodies, really. They don't get anything for it. So yeah, that was, and getting hit with a machete was worse than the mock executions, really, because if they, when they're drunk and they're hitting you, and if they just slight turn of the hand, and they'll take a limb off, or cut your head off or whatever, it just, so that was scarier than the stuff with the weapons. So that took some time to kind of get my head round afterwards. Didn't bother me for a few years, and then it all kind of started bubbling up. So I had to do a fair bit of work with that one.
So these were consecutive years, were they? You said the
Yes.
first one, and then so it was like, was it 2006? Did you say? Then 2007, something
Yep.
like that. And this is all while you're working in the sort of oil and gas industry.
This
after
was
the military and things.
This was doing the human intelligence stuff, and when those, because I was a contractor, I would kind of get mobilized and demobilized for each job. So I'd do the job, and then I'd be signed off, and I'd sign a contract every time I went and did a job. So I did other things in between all that stuff. So I worked in the security, on doing close protection and security consultancy stuff as well along the way, and carrying on studying psychology as well. So I carried on doing all that.
Were any of the other kind of captives who were taken with you? Did obviously you had your military background and your military training and that kind of thing, which sounds like, from what you said, doesn't make it any easier, but it kind of helped you. You could draw on some of your experiences from the military as to what was going on. Were some of the other people who were captives as well? Were they military background, or were they civilians more? And
they were civilians. Yeah, I was the only ex-military on that particular occasion. So yeah, I kind of, the thing with that one is that what got me through that more than anything else was actually focusing on getting them through it. That kind of gave me a purpose and something to focus on.
I was about to ask the question, actually, because you said you've rescued hostages, you've negotiated release of hostages.
Yeah.
Which is more stressful, you being kidnapped, or you being responsible for getting someone else out?
That, I think, ultimately is more stressful. Because when you're a hostage, you're only really focusing on yourself, getting yourself through it. But when you're responsible for kind of saving somebody's life and getting them out of a sticky situation, there is a lot of stress and pressure with that one. I think far more so, for sure. I mean, rescuing hostages is great fun.
Well, yeah. I wouldn't know.
It's that's the fun side of it.
In what way?
Because you've got the pressure of, obviously there is the pressure of obviously not shooting the hostage or hostages, but you're recovering people. There's a massive adrenaline rush with that. When you get that green light and you get to go, it's and it's very satisfying, relieving the world of people that don't really deserve to be there.
Yeah,
I think, because a polite way of putting it.
Yeah. No, I just think that's interesting, because it kind of goes in life as well, isn't it? I don't know how to put it, but because people, like, when we talk about stress and stuff like that, people are constantly trying to work out what the partners are thinking and what other people are thinking and what this person's in there. It's all kind of external, isn't it? Rather than worrying about, like, getting yourself sorted, and then you can start to, like, kind of then you can start to worry about other people. So, like, that's why it's interesting to find out which is the most stressful, helping yourself out or helping other people out. And it tends to be helping other people, doesn't it? Because obviously it's on you. If anything happens, you've got to live with it.
Yes.
which is good, you know, is just is hard to deal with.
It is.
So
I've had one that didn't work, that lost one hostage in negotiation.
okay.
Yeah, that was even now that's still tough to
Yeah.
swallow, really. I still don't like that.
And what happened with the third occasion, Simon? Was this the next consecutive year? So
yeah, this was 2008.
Yeah.
This was my last job in that line of work that I was. So I was in Sweden, and the particular individual I was working with, he'd spotted that he'd been under surveillance. He'd spotted people following the same people, same cars. So I went and did some anti-surveillance and picked up who yes, you are being followed, right? This is the plan. So where he lived on the outskirts of Stockholm, out in the islands, to the east of the city, the house he had there, he was there with his ex-wife and kids, and around the back, it was all woods around the house. So I went and cleared around the back of his house every night to make sure everything was okay. And this particular night, there was a van and a couple of cars parked up that weren't normally down in the car park down the bottom of the road, and there was some guys around the back of the house in the woods. So I went back and I could see they had weapons. So I went back to the car, got on the phone, was relaying this information back, when van pulled up in front of my car, and I got taken out of the car at gunpoint and given a bit of a hiding, then thrown in the back of the van. And I just had this gut feeling that this was going to be a one-way trip, because they didn't hood me, they didn't tie me up. I was put in the back of the van with two blokes. It was a big transit van thing. So it was like, and then there's benches, like bench seats over the wheel arches. So there was a guy between me and the door, and there was a guy opposite me at the front. So I was caught in between, both with weapons. And I was just thinking, I've got to get out of here. You know, if they're going to kill me, at least I'm going to die trying to get away. And the only thing I could think of doing, and I still don't know how I managed to get any saliva in my mouth, but I got as much saliva in my mouth as I could, and I adjusted my feet and then leant forwards a little bit, and I grabbed the muzzle of the weapon of the guy next to me and pushed it away to control it, lunged forward, spat all this saliva into the other guy's face, and then rammed this guy against the door and flipped the handle, and the door fell open, and we went tumbling out. His head, although this was March, so there's still quite a lot of snow, and his head hit the road and basically popped like a melon. And we rolled, and on the side of the road, because it was snowing, and there was trees either side, woods either side. So I just hobbled in, because I twisted my knee, I dislocated my shoulder again. I had a fractured eye socket, a couple of broken ribs, and I just hid in the woods. I just went as far as I could, and then laid down and covered myself in leaves and snow, and just stayed there until, because there was still traffic on the road as well. And I laid there until they just, I heard them drive off, and I went out to see where they were, to make sure it was clear. I lay there for about an hour and a half, hour and 3/4. It's bloody freezing, and then I made it back to the car, to where the car was, and they just left the car. And one of the things I'd always did was I had a spare set of keys, and I secured them under the vehicle so that I knew I could always get back in. So I drove back into Stockholm, and then got on the phone again, because they'd taken my phone off me and stamped on it, so I couldn't use it. So I went back to my apartment in Stockholm, and and then phoned in the good news. But fortunately, the individual they'd got in touch with him, and he'd followed the plan and gone to a hotel in Stockholm, and he just follow the plan, and we flew to London the next morning.
Wow. So how long did that ordeal take? Was that like a few couple of hours or something, start to finish? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was the shortest of them all, but yeah, definitely the most painful. And I think of all three, it's definitely the scariest one of the lot.
There's dealing with the situation at the moment and being cool and being able to handle that stress both in the moment, and then there is trying to handle the stress in reflection. And those are two different skills for you, or are they the same?
Yeah, they are. In the moment, it's easy to park your emotions in the moment because you've got something to focus on. Getting yourself out the shit, basically. So you're drawing on all everything you've learned, all your skills to manage yourself and focusing on getting out of the situation as best you can. But you're absolutely right. Afterwards, it's always in the quiet hours when it comes from the back of your mind to the front and comes out in all its technicolor glory.
Do you play through scenarios, or do you just question how you managed to do it? I mean, is it because obviously you came through these things, as in the best possible situation, given the situation you were in, came out with your life, came out with at times with minimal injuries, considering. Do you play through the scenarios, or do you just
I did. Yeah, I did. What else could I have done? Could I have got away quicker? Could I have avoided it at all? So yeah, I know it's weird because I got back to the UK that day, and then I had a week at home, and then I had an interview for a job on I got home on the Friday, I think it was. I had a call with a friend on the Monday. I had an interview on the Thursday, and had a new job coaching in oil and gas. And it just kind of weirdly kind of slotted into place. So I then had to, I was then focused on this new job and getting used to being offshore and being on a rig and all that, and platforms and stuff. And it was a bit weird, but it distracted me for quite some time because it was a steep learning curve being offshore. But it's a weird one. It is a weird one. It takes much more effort to manage your mind after an event than during.
I think it's just speaking as someone who's listening to all of this for the first time, obviously, Simon. I mean, I, like many people, I suppose, you watch films on TV, you watch TV programs that involve military stuff and gunfights and things like that, and it kind of almost washes over you because it's entertainment when you watch it, and it's not real, it's dramatizations and all the rest of it. But just hearing you talk about these events so candidly and so openly and honestly, I mean, it's I mean, for me anyway, it's I suppose it's shocking, really, because it is something totally different. I mean, I presume for Pete and Paul, it's the same. This is things that Simon's talking about, situations he's been in that you may have seen in films and TV in the past and seen it as entertainment. And then when you actually know someone who's talking about that life and death situation and how you dealt with it, I mean, it's so obviously now trying to kind of juxtaposition, I suppose, what all those experiences you've had, and then what it took you into, how has that affected, impacted, led the development of your life and your career and so on since those times?
Significantly. The stuff that I do now is based around the techniques that I use to keep myself on an even keel during those times, and how they've been refined and adapted to become what they are now. It was the main course that I offer, which is based around psychological and emotional resilience. And it's utilizing those techniques, and I've refined it and put it into a course that I've been teaching for the last 5 years, and I've written a book about it. I've got it on, so I do face-to-face training. I've got an online version, and during kind of the lockdowns, I was delivering it via Zoom. And it's three really simple self-regulation techniques, and then there's a reprocessing technique to help deal with problematic memories that won't leave you alone, and to basically recode them.
And you mentioned before we started recording, I think, that you're also in conversation with a university as well, aren't you? In terms of doing this course and these techniques and things. Yeah. What's happening with that? Kind of, what's the framework around that?
Well, I'll definitely find out more tomorrow. I've got a meeting tomorrow to kind of go through my presentation, explain the demonstration that I'll be doing next Thursday, to a whole bunch of people from their business unit and different departments who are coming along. So yeah, and I've said to them, if they can find somebody who's going to be a willing demo subject that is happy to have free therapy in front of other people, then I'll do a live demonstration of how it works. Coming in cold, not knowing anything about them.
So what did you do? You mentioned kind of coaching work that you've done before. Yeah. Is this more like that? This sounds more like you say, kind of more therapy and stuff now as well, is it? Or
it's a mixture of therapy and coaching, because I became aware a long time ago that there's a very blurry line between coaching and therapy. As a coach, you can get into some deep stuff quite quickly, and people can then get overwhelmed and end up in a snotty, bubbling heap. And as a coach, you're not necessarily equipped to deal with that kind of reaction with somebody as effectively as that person might need. So having this course gives people the ability to move across that line. So if you're in a coaching session, somebody has a meltdown, you can then deal with it using some therapeutic skills to get them back into kind of the coaching space, to then continue on or finish that session on a positive note, rather than leaving them going home full of snot and tears.
That's really interesting, because I was going to ask the question, what's different about this than what's already. There's obviously clearly something different if the university are interested in it and stuff like that, because they'll have seen lots of stuff like this. So what's different between that and what's already out there? But I mean, there's everyone's a coach these days, aren't they? So and you're right, and you can really open up a Pandora's box in someone's brain, can't you? When you talk about something, and then, like you say, at the end of an hour-long session, you might be like, oh, and you've just sent them away and created so many, or not created issues, but brought to the front a lot of issues that they'll not be able to deal with, and you can't. So
yeah, absolutely.
So how does it? I mean, you've said it helps with that, but kind of. Can you explain a bit more? I mean, without going into too much detail, obviously, but
yeah, sure. I mean, in whether it's coaching or therapy, the first thing I do in the very first session is I teach all my clients these 3 self-regulation techniques, because they're useful for everybody really in managing themselves, because we all have good days and bad days, and when the shit hits the fan, if you're having a bad day and something else goes wrong, you can end up kind of having to pull both feet out of your mouth, don't you?
Yes.
Well, I certainly do.
I was talking about that with one of my guys this morning. This is a bit of an aside, but just, I got angry at something in the kitchen, and my girlfriend Sean was in the living room, and she kept quiet because she was like wondering what she'd done wrong to make me angry. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you start second guessing what people think. I think I got angry at a plate or something because I couldn't get a stain off it or something. It's something stupid, but it's because I was tired. So yeah, that's it. It's very often it's these little things that we lose our shit over. But it never is, though, is it? That's the thing.
It's an accumulation of things.
It's literally the final. Well, not literally, but it's the final straw, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. So the way it works is I started developing these things in 2007, in piecing them all together, because I thought, I was thinking, what did I do to get myself through it, and what did I share with these guys to help them get through it? And these techniques I used with them and with the other 4 guys on the second one. So I kind of pieced it all together. And so the first one is basically, it does what it says in the tin. It's called a negative thought pattern interrupt. And it does exactly that. And in the course, I go into the different frequencies that our brain operates in, and kind of, and the functions it performs in those frequencies. And that there's a positive and a negative to each state. So, a high performance state, when our brain is in the gamma frequency, which is anywhere up to kind of 400 hertz. When a good example is, rally drivers, the Isle of Man TT, they can't do that and think about it. They have to be absolutely in flow, unconscious, doing what they're just in complete flow state. So it can be a really positive state, high performance, but it can also be extremely low performance, because when you're full of stress and angst and all the rest of it, and fear or anger or whatever it is, you feel your brain spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour, your heart rate's up, your breathing's shallow and fast, your blood pressure's high, you're sweating, you feel sick. And it's a very unproductive state, which is where, because this is your fight or flight system kicking in. So it's about taking your brain speed, reducing your brain speed from gamma into that beta frequency, which is what we're in now. Normal everyday conversation and working and all that sort of stuff. So that's, we want to get it out of that, because like being, you can't do, it's like changing gears on a car. You can't, you want to get it down into first or second gear, so that you can't do 200 miles an hour. So that it can perform certain things at different frequencies. So it's about reducing slowing down the brain's frequency to take people out of their fight or flight, to disengage that and initiate the parasympathetic nervous system, so that you rest and relaxation, calm things down. So this negative thought pattern interrupt is so simple. Basically, it kind of takes the wind out of it's like, I describe it as having a tornado in your head, and the more you try and stop it, the worse it gets. It's like you feed it. And when other people try, just fucking calm down, chill out, stop being a dick, you get all this stuff thrown at you, because it's obviously that it's that easy when you don't know how.
Yeah.
And it's about
people asking you why you're angry. I'm not angry. And it makes yeah.
Yes. Yeah, like a daddy pig out of Peppa Pig. That's what I get described as.
What's interesting there is, this is what interests me. I mean, it all interests me, to be honest, obviously, but is the physiological responses you get to thoughts and feeling, like the feeling and stuff like that. And then, and this is when, just like kind of linking it to like the health aspect, and, people who want to lose weight and get fitter and stronger and all of this sort of stuff. But like, it goes with everything, doesn't it? And it makes that, it doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it a damn sight harder if you're in a constant, I mean, like in your course, it talks about chronic stress.
Yeah.
And if you're a constant state of stress, that's what needs to get sorted first, isn't it? And like you say, people try and ignore that and do other things, and it's like, no, the actual physiological response puts your body into a state where it's just going to be a cyclical loop. That you can't do it, so therefore you fail, so you get more stressed, and then it just keeps happening and happening and happening until you actually, well, I mean, does this pattern interrupt kind of help? It won't deal with it immediately, obviously, but like over time, does it sort of bring it down
yes,
a curve sort of thing? Yeah.
You'd be surprised actually how quickly this stuff works. Taking that initial technique, there's one particular person I use this with, who, when I set up this the charity that I left the charity January last year, to focus on doing what I'm doing now, because the charity is now off and running, and left, my co-founder is continuing on with it. But I had a veteran who FaceTimed me at about 1:30 in the morning. And I woke up and looked at the script, and he was there. He had about that much left in a litre bottle of vodka. He was standing on a chair with a noose around his neck.
Jesus.
And he said, I said, why did you, I asked him why he called, if he was, all set up and ready to go. And he said, well, I looked down at the table next to me and I saw this number. I think it was his sister had given him the number. And he thought, well, fuck it, I've got nothing to lose. I'll make one more phone call. If it's no use, I'll just step off. And I used this I talked to him for about half an hour, 40 minutes. And then I explained about the tornado in his head. And he was like, yeah. And I ran him through this technique. And you do it in rounds. You do it as many rounds as you need to get somebody down to where it all stops. And I think we did 3 rounds, each round lasting about 20, 30 seconds. And he just started laughing. And that was the only thing I ever did with this guy.
Wow.
I mean, it's not always like that, obviously. But it was enough to get him to, I said, do you want to take the noose off and sit down before you hang yourself accidentally? So
yeah, that would. Well, but I mean, you'd be imagine telling the story like, but then you'll never guess what happened. God, but that's yes. Amazing stuff. That, I mean, because this is the thing. I mean, do you think that he made that phone call because he didn't want to do it anyway, and he knows, like,
ultimately, yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things, isn't it? People kind of, they're just. I mean, I don't know because I've never been suicidal, but it's kind of like you hear lots of things about it, like people who survived a suicide attempt then say, they've stepped off somewhere or whatever, and the last thing that went through the head was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Or, yes. And there's lots of things like that I've heard about. I mean, that's anecdotal with me, but then people who ring someone or whatever in the very last moment just before, which is basically that's the cry for help, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I did, as my military career and my marriage and my home were all disappearing, I got to that point in '98. I'd a year before, my best mate at the time had put the pistol in his mouth and shot himself and survived. Wow. Freakishly. And I thought, well, I'll learn from his mistake. So I was sat on my sofa with the barrel of a pistol pushing it in my eye. I thought, I'm not going to miss. I'm not going to screw this up. But earlier on, I'd phoned around a few people to kind of subtly say goodbye. And one guy I called, I was in North London at the time, and he was in Bournemouth. And I'd phoned him in the morning. He was a guy I'd known since I was 4, when I first came up to Shetland. And so I'd phoned him, and for whatever reason, he'd picked up on something, and he just got in his car and drove from Bournemouth to London.
Wow. And
I'm sat there like that with a cup of tea and a couple of chocolate digestives, finished them, and was sat there, and he rang the doorbell. It was literally seconds away from pulling the trigger. Wow. It really pissed me off, actually. Inconvenient bastard.
So, and then what happened when you let him in and he came in, and you did you tell him that you were just about to do it?
No, I put the pistol under the sofa cushion and I opened the door. I said, what the fuck are you doing here? And he just said, oh, thought I'd surprise you. And then we went out and got drunk. And then that was that was the end of that. But I didn't tell him until I think it was 2019.
Wow.
And I was
that's that 20 years later, 21 years later.
21 years later, yeah. So I ended up staying at he lives in Exmouth, and I was doing a presentation to the Commander Training Centre in Lympstone, just up from Exmouth. And I stayed at his flat, and I told him then. Because we just, parted, and just everybody goes off and does their own thing in life, don't they? And so yeah, I hadn't seen him for ages, and yeah, I told him. So that was a funny old thing. We went out and got drunk again.
So the thing with that is the difference there. I mean, you've obviously rang a few people,
Mm.
but the difference there was you were then on your own, and he happened to turn up.
Yeah.
But you answered the door,
Yeah.
so you could have easily not and just went, "Oh, sod it." But
Yeah.
so was that again in the head? That was like, "Oh, there's someone at the door." So it's kind of like, I'll do it in a second. I'll just go and get the door first." So you obviously clearly didn't really want to do it.
No.
It was just you just, which is weird. That's why I struggle to get my head around. You don't want to do it, but you're gonna. Do you know what? Like I can't explain it. Do you know what I mean? It's like when you're getting angry at something, you know you don't want to get angry at it, but you're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah.
And you know it's wrong, and you know it might end your marriage, or it might, like, something might happen. You know, not as drastic as what was happening there, but something is going to happen that you're going to regret, but you're going to do it anyway. And
Yeah.
this is the thing that obviously acting on emotions and stuff like that. This is the thing that fascinates me, because we all do it and we all know we shouldn't. And
Yes. But it becomes habit, and we become actually we become addicted to stress.
Yeah.
And when our life isn't stressful, we create stress because stress becomes the comfort zone. And when you feel comfortable, it feels weird. So you do things to stress yourself out and self-sabotage in order to be in your comfortable discomfort.
And in a world where everyone's telling you, and we're guilty of this as well, that being comfortable, kind of is the end. So therefore you should not seek discomfort, but, you should, like, doing ice baths and stuff like that. Then do people then think, well, that's me, because I'm always out of my comfort zone. But that's stress rather than actual seeking out a challenge or something like that instead.
Yes.
Which is stress, but is more excitement stress than stress, which is can turn up with similar symptoms, can't they? Like excitement. I keep talking about a YouTube video with a lady called Kelly McGonigal on this. And she talks about the very thought of thinking stress is bad for you can shorten your life, as opposed to the people who can handle stress really well, because it turns up as excitement, which opens up your arteries and all that, rather than closing them down and turning you into that ball.
It's the perception in here and the emotional label you place on something, because fear and excitement feel the same way.
Mm.
The physical sensations are exactly the same. It's just the emotional label that we attach.
Strength training is a stress. I mean, lots of good things are stresses, aren't
exactly.
they? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean,
yes.
We all have clients, I'm sure, that turn up to sessions kind of rubbing their hands together, excited to see what they're going to do that day. And then you've got clients who see the same workout, roll their eyes and go, "Oh, can't believe it's, burpees."
Yes.
The perception of the same event can be either positive stress or negative stress, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, there's the two main types. You've got eustress, EU stress, which is good, healthy stress. And then you have distress.
Yeah.
And it's, it could be different. The same thing for two different people can be one end or the other. Jumping out of a perfectly good aircraft with a parachute, I hasten to add. It scares the crap out of you the first time you do it, but once you've got over that and okay, I can actually do this, it then becomes exciting. And you're going out doing free fall and stuff, or bungee jumping, or downhill mountain biking, or scuba diving, or whatever it is. But that's the thing, is making stress part of your life in a positive, constructive way, so that you expand. It is about kind of, in some sense, going outside of your comfort zone in order for it to grow to include that part of your life that is stressful, but make it a good stress, so it becomes normal.
Comfort zone expansion.
So we talk about this quite a lot in training, because we're all trained. We've all got the same trainer, and he's friend of the show, Paul McElroy. He's been on before, and he talks about training like as in using heavier weights.
Yes.
You train within relative comfort, and it's all about the proximity to your comfort zone, and you can expand your comfort zone without ever going outside of it.
Yes.
And it sounds like a similar thing, but with your, like, with your what would you call it? Your brain response, your however you respond to a stressful situation.
Yeah.
And like Paul's just said, training is stress anyway. It's stress on the body. We're just expanding that comfort zone. So it sounds very similar, because I think people get scared I certainly did. I mean, I've done some of this stuff before in various different guises and what have you. And it's really scary, because like I said, you open up Pandora's box and you're like, right, if I deal with this, that turns up, that turns up, that turns up. And it's like, yeah, but you're dealing with it all the time. This way you'll actually deal with it, and then it'll turn up, but it won't have the same response as it did before, because you now know how to handle it.
Yes.
Do you reverse engineer from high performers? So like, if I was to think about Elon Musk running like some of the most stressful industries, Tesla, car, automotive industry,
yes,
rockets, you name it. That to me, it takes a unique mind to be able to deal with that level of stress. And in your industry, in the military, and in other areas of kind of protection and stuff like that, you must have come across very high performing people who could maintain their cool under highly stressful situations, come out unscathed, and repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Do you talk to those people on like how they do it? Do they just naturally come to those ways of behaving, or do you think there's a formula that can be?
There are various ways that people. There is a kind of common theme along of stuff, and it's about, the key to all of this is managing your psychology, managing the state in here in order to control this. If you can when you learn to kind of channel the energy from emotion, initially you might think, shit, I'm terrified, but then it's reframing that to something, right, okay, so this has happened, I can do all these things, rather than being channeled and blinkered and thinking, oh shit, this has happened, and seeing nothing else. It's being aware of the options that you have in that moment to overcome it. Because there's always options.
Yeah, going back to your story earlier, Simon, where you're sat in the back of this transit, and think you could be approaching the end, and you still had the clarity of thought, I suppose, at that moment to think about getting this saliva in your mouth and assessing the situation and thinking, right, I'm going to move the muzzle there, I'm going to do, it's kind of, you are talking, what you're talking about now is what you actually did, isn't it, in a highly life and death situation,
yes,
where you thought, rather than thinking, oh shit, I'm going to die, I'm dead, you kind of thought, well, what can I do in this situation? It seems that it's a hopeless situation, but what can I do? And within probably a matter of minutes, you formulated a plan and you executed the plan, and ultimately you saved your life. So it's obviously most people never have to do it to that, in that life and death situation. And I presume the guys guys and girls and ladies and business people that you work with, when you were doing your resilience training, when you've been doing it for the last number of years, what kind of people do you have, come on your courses, and who do you teach?
I've so far a lot of veterans. I've taught this to various guys and girls in UK Special Forces. I've talked about this to New York Police Department, their hostage negotiation teams, to the FBI, and I've taught from psychiatrists down to auxiliary nurses within the NHS, lots of veterans, wives and girlfriends and etc. and boyfriend etc. of veterans. So I focused on the military community to start with, but there's a lot more. There's more help now for veterans than there's ever been, and there are other human beings that need more help now, and in particular, I think it's male suicide has increased from, was it 3 years ago, it was 84 men a week. Now it's up to 120 something a week dying, killing themselves.
So that's 50% up, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's, it's a sad, serious situation. And it's stuff like this, because these techniques, these self-regulation tools, you can use them in any context with any number of people around you. Nobody knows what you're doing. So it's completely covert, and there's no having a crystal or a rock in your pocket or having an elastic band on your wrist to ping. There's nothing for you to forget to take with you, because it's all in here.
Are you doing it right now? Imagine that.
I genuinely practice what I preach. I use these every day.
I don't doubt it. I mean, Kirsten, she's been vocal about it on social media. So, well, I hope she doesn't mind me saying. If she does, it's tough, because I'm going to say it.
I wouldn't have.
But you helped her out, didn't you? Like only last week or the week before, she said. Because she came out on social media saying, like, I've been down in the ditch.
Yeah.
And she'd done a bit of work with you, and it's helped her out of it. So yeah, I think that's pretty.
Do you see? We live in a different world in a way to maybe 20, 30 years ago, where, the role of social media, the role of a lot of external pressure, particularly on young people. I definitely think people came out of COVID slightly traumatized. And for better or for worse, we could say pull yourself together or whatever. People came out kind of it was a weird level, in some levels of aggression and stress are quite obvious, aren't they? They're kind of like someone in your face, or going through a physical trauma, or an illness. Those things are quite tangible in some ways, so you can at least put your finger on it. But then there are things where we're in environments now where people are struggling to kind of interact with each other, whether it's people getting triggered about stuff, or social media putting a lot of pressure on people to look certain ways, or pressure on kids knowing that they can't kind of. I spoke to a lot of teenagers, the parents are there, and the teenagers were talking about social media, and they're like, oh, we wouldn't get drunk because it will just go up on its social media and then it'll be there forever, kind of thing. So there's lots of modern weird kind of stresses now that people just have as part of their everyday life. Are you working with people, dealing with those stresses,
Yeah, I do. I've worked with a few schools around here, and I've had quite a number of parents get in touch and dealing with exam stress or bullying or whatever it is, helping. A lot of kids are struggling with anxiety and depression these days. It's a lot more so than it used to be.
I spoke to an A&E doctor who was training in the gym I operate out of, and he was saying during the pandemic, it wasn't drunks, it wasn't like random injuries that they were seeing in A&E. It was a lot of teenagers who were self-harming and with mental health problems.
Yeah, it was definitely hard on the kids. More so, I think, as adults, we're quite often happy to have a bit of be isolated and from time to time and enjoy that. But as human beings, we're hardwired to connect with each other, aren't we? We're tribal. We like social connection and human interaction, but especially as kids, that's it's part of the development, isn't it?
Yeah.
And without that, it can make life extremely difficult. So
that's interesting though, because you're saying like social connection and interaction, but not online either. Like actually, face to face. That's the key, isn't it?
It is. Yes. Yeah. Makes a massive difference. I know my kids are 15 and 16, and I know how hard it was for them homeschooling. Doing everything online and the difference it's made. And my son had, for the Scottish equivalent of A levels, is Highers, and he did them earlier this year, and that's the first proper exam situation he's been in, because the year before that they didn't do it. They didn't do exams. So can be suddenly your first exams in A level, you're like, holy shit. It was a bit weird. So it's been difficult, really difficult for everybody, really.
So
Yeah.
what are you working on at the moment, Simon? Or what if people, like, obviously we've only just met today, but if
Yes.
I'm obviously really interested in everything that you do, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners will be as well. If people want to kind of find out more, and I know Pete mentioned like an online course that you've got and things, where do people kind of access this sort of thing, and where's best for people to go to kind of start finding out more about what you're talking about?
On my website, it's got pretty much everything that well, I hope so. It's not guaranteed, but yeah, my website, which is simonmaryan.com, that's where I've got everything. I've got a training page on there that's got a link to all the online courses. So yeah, everything's yeah.
And what's the can you just mention that you mentioned the charity that you kind of set up and now you've kind of stepped back from, but that what was the charity that you helped establish and that you kind of co-founded?
It's called Icarus, as in the Greek myth. So yeah, so started that in 2017, and it quickly became apart from a small charity, but it went from 2 of us in 2017 to, I think when I left last year, there were 20 plus therapists on the team, board of trustees, chairman, my co-founders, the chief exec, carrying on running with that now. And it's it went from treating a couple of hundred people to 1,200 people in the space of 3-4 years. And it was, despite being a small charity, it was the largest provider of veterans mental health in the UK.
Wow. So you specifically worked at the charity Icarus specifically was working with veterans, yeah? And
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It was weird. It was the name, we were discussing what to call it. And David said, thought having an acronym would be good, so it had more meaning. And I literally dreamt this. I dreamt I was looking at myself from behind, standing on grass, and in the clouds came the letters. It spelled Icarus, and then the meaning dropped out onto the grass for each word. So it became immediate. It's kind of, this is where it all came from: immediate care, assessment, and rehabilitation for uniformed services.
Wow.
So it had that, and with the Icarus complex, which was about, now bipolar was manic depression, about helping people manage the highs and lows of manic depression, is the Icarus complex. So it had several meanings to it, and it just stuck.
Wow. So that charity is now still doing the work that that it has, and you're now moving more into the delivering the kind of training and the kind of the courses and things that you're working on yourself now.
Yeah, and getting it into different sectors, working on a project to work with more doing stuff with kids. So I've got a project kind of working on with a couple of people to get that out, and yeah, writing another book, actually writing a kid's book. So that's kind of trundling along slowly in the background. Yeah, just getting it, and obviously getting this into the university is a big thing that I want to get done. How quickly that would happen, I don't know, but yeah, sooner the better as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, and just getting out and speaking to people, just this as much as possible, and digging up some, finding, like yourselves, finding people for my own podcast and chatting to people and getting the word out there, really, because there's a lot of people that need these tools and techniques, that find finding life really hard, but it doesn't stop life being hard. It just makes it easier to cope with. It's not about ultimately, it's Paul, you were talking about triggers and we have a response to things. This is exactly that. We can't change the triggers, but we can change how we think and feel about them to generate a different response to it. It's not about about deleting memories. It's about making them comfortable to live with, so that they're not a problem. Because we can't change what's happened, but we can change how we've stored it in here, and we can literally go in and change. It's like a coding sequence for each memory and how we've processed it and stored it. We basically go in and change the code so that we then process it in a different way and store it differently. So when we recall it, it's just, oh yeah, that happened. That was really shit. What's for lunch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it can become, rather than a stress, become a learning experience as well. Can't it? Like after that, and then
yeah. Even if it's just, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I think that's a good place to start wrapping up, actually, because I mean that's, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there for people to digest. And if you're willing, we might get you back on again. I mean, we've had several people back on again just to like keep us posted on how it's going with the university stuff and everything. Because I mean, what I found really interesting with like that last little bit you just said there was that you've been talking to hostage negotiators in the police and FBI, and you mentioned psychiatrists as well and stuff like that. And you think like, but surely they would have learned all of this stuff, whatever it is. I mean, we don't know what it is exactly, but obviously they haven't, and you've enlightened them on something else they could be doing and something else they could be using. So it just shows that we've got to keep learning. You've got to keep your mind open, and you've got to keep kind of revisiting this stuff, because things change, the world changes. So therefore,
yes,
our responses to things don't necessarily change. The brain doesn't necessarily change, because it's been around for however long we've been around and evolving over time. But it's the techniques that can always be something that can always be improved upon. And I think that's or this one doesn't work for this person, so therefore try this one. And then there's always something, isn't there? So I think it's amazing.
There's no one tool fixes everybody. And one thing I would like people to kind of to understand is that, some people have been in, treatment for stress and anxiety, depression, or trauma, or whatever it is for years sometimes, but it doesn't have to be a long drawn out process, and it doesn't have to be horrendously painful. It can happen. The bit that takes the length of time for most people is getting ready to make the change that they need, changes they need to make. Change happens bang like that. It's preparing for it that takes the time. But that can be when you get somebody, reframe things for somebody to get them to understand it in a way that makes sense to them, and give them the tools to manage themselves, because a lot of it is losing control, feeling out of control. So this gives people the remote control for this thing again, so they keep those chimps and under control.
Yeah, that's great. So we've got simonmaryan.com. What's your book called?
It's called The Immediate Care Process.
Brilliant. I'll be on that. Right.
And it's on Amazon.
Right. You're about to make a sale.
Fantastic.
So we'll, I think we'll wrap up there. It's been brilliant. Thanks for that, Simon. I think
my pleasure.
Before I ask James and Paul, I'll just say again, if this has resonated with you, or like as one of our listeners, or if you've got, like Simon just said earlier, when in 1998 when he was at home, he rang a few friends and one of them actually turned up. So sending, like, if you suspect someone's in that state or whatever, or even if you don't, just send it to them anyway. Because like we say, if this helps one person, then it's worthwhile doing, isn't it? 100%. James, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, just how this podcast never really ceases to amaze me. We were going to come onto this podcast this afternoon, and I didn't really know Simon. I kind of had a little look at what he does and pinged him a friend request on social media and that sort of thing. And you just never know the conversations you're going to have, and having that conversation and Simon telling his story part of his story, you know, in terms of where he's been, is just it's powerful stuff. You know, it's just been really you know, it's an hour that, you know, it's just an hour in the middle of the week, you know, that we've just kind of all sat down and had this conversation, and it's got the potential to change lives, you know, and to really help me and hopefully help other people think about things a bit differently. So thanks, Simon. It was an absolute pleasure getting to know you for the last hour or so, and I'm sure we'll stay connected and speak again.
Yeah, no, likewise. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah,
it's been really good.
Brilliant.
Really good.
What about you, Paul?
I know. I think you've probably made another sale. I buy that book.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
I wonder how quickly, if I order it today, if it will be delivered tomorrow, so I could take it on holiday on Thursday. I'll try that.
It probably would, actually. Yeah, I'm not 100%, but
I'll try.
Fantastic. I didn't know where the conversation was going to go, so I was just, you know, every time you were recounting a story, I was like, okay, right, I've got a lot of questions. So I've even got even more. So,
well, yeah, listen, I'm happy to chat anytime if you answer any questions. That's no problem at all.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
Excellent. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you again, Simon. And well done on the 3 sales of your book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've said it again. I've said it before. Please like and share. Email this link to your friends. We're all over everywhere you get your what's this? A podcast from. So we'll be back again next week with episode 102. I'm not even sure who we've got lined up for that. So yes, thank you for listening. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.